Sometimes when things are a little bit broken, it takes some time to fix them. And I think maybe we exposed some of the issues that were there before, but now we can see them so we can deal with them.
This episode of Bring Back the Porch, brought to you by Bernie Leahy, River Street Realty. Let's get you home. Linnsie Clark, welcome to the Porch.
Thank you for having me.
I wasn't sure that you would be here, given your experiences over the last 4 years. Kept watching the list of candidates to see who was going to run, and there was no Clark on the ballot. And I thought, what do I read into that?
Well, it was a difficult decision. I think the last 2 years have been challenging for sure, and it takes its toll, and your family is right there along with you, and so I needed to talk to them and get a lot of input, and I just decided eventually that I have more to do, and I think despite how it might look, we have made some progress. So other counselors are now asking for expense information to be public, and some of the initiatives like with respect to whistleblower, like Councillor Sharp's put a notice of motion regarding that forward. So I think we're headed in the right direction, and I would hate to see us go backwards. Sometimes when things are a little bit broken, it takes some time to fix them. And I think maybe we exposed some of the issues that were there before, but now we can see them so we can deal with them. And I really am excited for what's to come. There's a lot of good candidates running, and I'm hopeful that the next council will be a really good team that wants to empower our citizens and put the user, the customer first.
Andy McGrogan, when we were speaking with him, he said that perhaps maybe the perception around this council was because you maybe were a little too transparent. You did more business in open council than maybe had been done in the past, and so it might have looked like you didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah, I do think that is a possibility. When you do things in the open, that people can see them. They're open for discussion, debate, sometimes criticism, but ultimately that's the public's role, is to hold us accountable. And certainly we want people to do so in a respectful manner, but transparency is necessary for accountability, and it's one of the fundamental pillars of democracy. You can't, if you don't know what your government's doing, you can't hold them to account. So really glad that we got to where we got to. But yeah, when you shine the light on, like open the shutters and shine the light, sometimes you see things that you didn't know were there, and it can be a little bit jarring sometimes.
Now, I have heard this, and this is a question that was asked of me, and I'm not implying anything, but the question was asked, was the problem too many women on council?
No, that I suppose I've heard that too. I think there was a situation where I decided that I was going to hold someone to account, and I think it made people uncomfortable. I think that it made the counselors feel some emotions, and I think that kind of carried on quite long with all the different processes and whatnot. But I definitely would reject the premise that it's because there were so many women.
Okay, good. I wanted to ask you too, 4 years ago when you were elected and you had all these high hopes.
Yeah.
When did it start to go downhill?
I would say like the beginning of 2023, probably downhill is strong, but that's kind of when I I kind of stayed the course in terms of what my goals were, what our strategic plan said. We had a lot in there about community participation. And if you read the intro letter to our strategic plan, it talks about the importance of, maintaining effective feedback loops and welcoming the data that we get when users tell us their experience, when customers tell us what their experiences have been. That's valuable to us. And so I kind of kept on that route and the governance route. And I think probably for some people, governance is boring. It's foundational. Yes, it's foundational and it's necessary for everything else to work, but it's not everyone's cup of tea. And I think sometimes, it's easier for council people in general to discuss and be interested in things that they understand well. And so I think, if I'm elected again, that's going to be something that I do a little bit, focus a little bit more on, because I understand why trust and transparency and good governance are important, not just for the sake of it, but if we want to invite investment, if we want people to trust us enough to, come to our city and want to invest here, want to live here, we have to be trustworthy. And so everything is built on that foundation of governance.
What have you learned from the last 4 years? Because it has been a rough 4 years for you personally.
Yeah, I first of all kind of learned what I was capable of. We had some pretty rough meetings even before, the 2003. There was the utilities stuff and cats, and so the industrial park. So that was challenging, and I don't think I knew exactly how I would react to that, but was very grateful to learn that just being genuinely curious is a real advantage, because you're not so focused on, ouch, this is hurting my feelings. You're more focused on, okay, well, I want to understand why you're feeling this way. Because sometimes, an issue will present itself as one thing, but if you dig down deeper, it's really something else. And, at its heart, the utilities conversation was entirely about affordability. And that's something that everyone can relate to.
Yeah, money, it has been said that municipal government is the closest level to the people.
Yeah.
And boy, you sure find out in a hurry if you've made a misstep. Case in point might be Division Avenue.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm really proud of our administration for responding the way they did at our, not yesterday, but the previous council meeting, to say, yeah, we're going to take a step back. We've obviously, we might have been listening, but we didn't hear them, or we, as an example, like minimal misunderstandings, like a tiny misunderstanding, might result in big consequences. And I think in this case, the city rightly viewed a couple of lanes as parking that wasn't used for parking, which it was, but the users of that road had used them as driving lanes for many, many, many years. So even just asking the question, how are our residents actually using this infrastructure? Because what we have on paper might not be the same as how people are actually using that infrastructure. And I think having the answer to that early on would have helped kind of give the city a different perspective on the whole project.
Okay. Some things that are still left, I guess, for the next council, maybe the top of the list is the MCC, a group that might take the burden of running the utilities away from council. Where's your stance on that?
So council has rejected the municipally controlled corporation. That would have required a huge amount of effort, money. It's very complex, and it was voted down. Transfer of assets to the MCC, or the municipally controlled corporation. So my view is that I 100% agree that skill-based governance is necessary. I think that's something that I've been pushing for 4 years, but I would like to see us try it in-house first. Setting it up, I think Managing Director Pancoast did a good job last night of explaining. It's kind of like setting up the MCC and the rate review committee internally, but operating much like a municipally controlled corporation other than the profit motive. So I'm really excited about that. I think that's going to be really helpful for the next council. The reality is not everybody on council is going to be an expert in energy. Very few people are, probably. And so I think having that skill-based governance, especially because of all the changes that are happening in the energy world, the addition of renewables and carbon taxes and carbon pricing, we can use some help. And, it's not saying that Managing Director Pancoast and her team aren't doing, a very good job. It's just that even for them, it would be helpful to have this board or the committee of experts to kind of bounce ideas off of. And because sometimes there's more than one good answer. And so weighing between those things can be tricky sometimes. So I'm hopeful that what we get back, or perhaps the next council gets back, will outline a way forward that we can have the best of both worlds, that skill-based governance, together with keeping the assets with the city.
Economic development is another big one for every council. I think every election that I have covered going back into the 70s, economic development, and it's like a broken record. So
longer than downtown vibrancy?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Economic development has been one of the things that people have been talking about for a long time, which tells me that maybe we're not doing it right. So how do you see the role of the mayor in bringing industry and people and jobs to our city?
Yeah, I think there's room for the mayor to take a more forward-facing role in that. But ultimately, what it comes down to is, again, going to sound like a broken record, but you have to have a solid foundation. And so there's certain things like the fundamentals of economic development, business retention, and expansion, and business attraction, and then, of course, workforce development. Those are fundamental things that a city should never stop doing. And sometimes with economic development, there's a desire to have like the flashy ribbon cutting and, the big announcement. And that's great, but our economy grows one job at a time. Small businesses expanding with the number of small businesses we have is a huge win. Medium-sized businesses as well. Like if our existing businesses can expand, not only is that good for our economy, but it also tells us that we're providing a business-friendly environment. And when we provide a business-friendly environment, that's going to be an attractant in and of itself, instead of, perhaps businesses saying, oh, that city's so hard to deal with. It'll be, who you should talk to? The city of Medicine Hat. And that's where I want to be. And I think empowering our businesses to grow is really important. But again, these widely, every 4 years changing the strategy on economic development is, it doesn't provide consistency. And it doesn't change the fact that there are 3 or 4 fundamental things that you have to always be doing for economic development. And those are sometimes boring, like long-term things. But if we view relationships as important, I mean, I'm sure you know that it's not a relationship to just come to someone when you need them. And sometimes you build these relationships, you know, for example, going out to conferences, going out to conventions, trade shows in other cities where people who are investing are, and selling the city to them, but not expecting anything. You can't expect something to come with no relationship. So sometimes you build these relationships and, you know, you have the relationship for 10 years, no investment, but then all of a sudden, the right time, the right place, if that relationship is sound and you've built trust with that person, they're going to think of you when they're, you know, planning their next site plant.
You mentioned the pillars that need to be in place for economic development. What do you see them as, and where are we in terms of them in the city of Medicine Hat?
Yeah, so it's business retention, business expansion. So those are within our own city. And then business attraction. And of course, we have workforce development as well. So by workforce retention, attraction, that comes into also community wellness. You have to have a community that people feel welcome in. They feel like they want to call it home. They feel like it's a good environment for business. So those are small things that we can do. And I think initiatives like Southside Pool and Water Slide Recreation Center, I think, you know, that's one of the things that might attract families, younger people, make it, you know, easier to live. It's so funny how quickly you go from, like, I lived in Vancouver for a while, and, you know, you drive an hour to get downtown. And here feels like if you're in Ross Glen, going to Costco is a huge...
Take a lunch.
Yeah. And it was very quick when I got back here that it, you know, the 15 minutes became like, oh, such a long time. But the other thing, though, is having a community, something a little bit closer. It allows, you know, kids to walk, take the bus, ride their bikes to the pool, which is really important as well. And so those are the 4 main pillars. In 2019, the city did in conjunction with a bunch of community members, businesses, community organizations, the provincial government. We did a business retention and expansion and workforce development survey and study. And basically what that did is a group of, I think, 400 volunteers talked to businesses in our catchment area, so out to Bow Island, and just kind of like tell us what your pain points are. And then so a list was developed of these initiatives that would be helpful, like an industrial cluster study, trades development, those types of things. And then kind of put out to the community and saying, you know, these are the things we think would help. Is this something you would want to invest in? And so then whatever group of people or community groups that wanted to invest in that thing could get together and kind of do it yourself a little bit. Because obviously the city can't do everything, but we have a great community that can help us grow our economy together. So hopefully we don't let that die with new management and COVID. That kind of, the initiative kind of lost steam. People are still working on the initiatives, because they came from community. And so, like, this is what you told us you wanted. So obviously, like, those are going to be good projects to do. So people have been picking away at these projects, and I think I think it would be really valuable to kind of pick up where we left off. With fruit, wasn't perfect. Nothing is, but we can't, delete the good in the pursuit of the perfect.
The difficulty you face as a city councilor member around the table is that if you talk about putting a nice new facility out in the south with a pool and all that, people who are in Crescent Heights looking at the old Heights Rec Center and a pool that has been closed for many years, or those who are looking at the Moose Rec Center and wondering, oh, does this mean the end of our neighborhood centers? It's a balancing act.
It really is. So the plan, and things can happen that would make this plan uneconomic, but is to keep the existing recreation centers, like Crestwood Pool, for example, to not close that until we have an alternative south side pool. Same with the rinks. It is very important to me to have community spaces, and we have lots of parks and that type of thing. We have great parks, great paths, and so we already have that going for us. But it is a tricky balance, because you do want to provide everything, but you don't want to pay the taxes that everything costs.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another choice that City Council is being faced with is the Medicine Exhibition and Stampede wants money for something that they say is necessary in our community, and it's still out there. They're doing some work. Where are you on that?
I am going to wait and see what the information that's brought back is. I would hate to get into a situation where we haven't done our due diligence, we commit this money, and the Stampede, Medicine Stampede and Exhibition still isn't economic, or still isn't making money, or is struggling to manage the business. So what was discussed at one point was putting together a project team, or like a working group oversight committee that would provide additional certainty for the city that our money was being well stewarded. My preference would be always to give, even if it's a no interest or low interest loan, is to do that, because at least then you have some potential of being paid back rather than a grant. Or you could secure that loan against, part of the lease. Like they could give up some of the lease land or whatever. I think I'm looking for a little bit more of a balanced approach rather than we should just pay. And I think that I would like to see community investment in the Stampede grounds and the grandstands. If this is important to our community, then there should be money out there to team up with and provide maybe advertising, or maybe a franchise might want to put their food store in there. I don't know, but I do think that I'd like to see some capital from the city from the community coming into that.
And you have to be cautious too, because we saw what happened in Lethbridge when they went whole hog with a new facility, and all of a sudden they went to the city of Lethbridge like, help.
Yes, and that's exactly why we have to be so careful, because it's already a very, very big investment. And I think hopefully we see what the Stampede board comes back with, but I would hate to make that investment only to wait a year and now we need more millions of dollars. And I don't think that's appropriate for the city either. So we do have to be real careful.
Another major expense is the Santa Solar Park. Some people view it as a boondoggle. Some say it's a great opportunity for the city that has always been known as the city with energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard, pros and people who are for it and people who are against it. I think what the goal was is there was this opportunity there. And sometimes you just have to seize the opportunity. And so we bought an interest in this project, and we don't own the land. It's a lease situation. And I think for me, I understand, our roots are in oil and gas, but I am also a fan of diversifying our energy portfolio, because we then have another avenue to generate revenue. And I think that it's going to come back to council, probably the next council, maybe this one late in the day, but at that point, we're going to have the data of, is this economic? Is it not economic? And that's really the question. So I think maybe some people are approaching it from an ideological point of view, but if you look at every energy company, like long-time oil and gas companies, they're investing in renewables because it's economic to do so. It's prudent to do so. It's good business to do so. And I think that's how this council is looking at this decision as well. We, have our varying views on, what types of energy we want to add to the mix. But at the end of the day, it's a business decision, and we have to do what's best for our ratepayers and residents.
Another political hot potato has been the mustard seed and
Yes.
the problem with the people who don't have anywhere to live.
Mm-hmm.
There is a suggestion now that perhaps the old youth hostel, which was built, I think, in the 70s to accommodate people who are, transient across Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and then became the labor hall, and now maybe it might be reverting back to its original use. But it's a classic example of NIMBY. Not in my backyard.
Yeah, there's no really good place to put it, and because it's an emergency shelter. So by its very nature, it is supposed to be transient. You don't want people living in an emergency shelter for long periods of time. You want that to be the kind of last resort and an opportunity for them to get housed or get the help that they need. It's not intended to be a long-term stay or housing. So it is a transient population, and it being in residential areas is not ideal. That's where you sleep, that's where your kids play. So we do recognize that the current location is not ideal, and the mustard seed recognizes that too. But then the challenge becomes, where else? And I think what I would like to see is perhaps some of the people, if they're struggling to find comfort with whatever good neighbor plan or techniques, design that could mitigate some of the spillover to other businesses and areas, what do you propose? Maybe they don't have another option, but maybe they do. So if I would really like to see that. Like, I've heard the arena a number of times. That's totally uneconomic to have such a big building for that use. And it is close to the police station, but it's also close to residential. I think no matter where you try and put a shelter, and this is across the board, every city, it's not welcome news for the area. So ultimately, I'm hoping our community, if this isn't the right spot for our community, I would like, to hear what they propose. What's an idea that you think would be good, but remembering that just moving it to someone else's neighborhood is also, not going to be attractive for that neighborhood either. So it's tough. And at the heart of it is, a mental health crisis, drug use crisis, fentanyl poisoning, and so people sometimes need help with that, and sometimes they just don't have the capacity to, at that moment in their life, to live independently. Just like, someone who gets Alzheimer's or some other, disability that they can't live independently anymore. They're not to be discarded just because that at that moment in their life they can't live independently. But how we get them back to health is an ongoing question. I don't think anyone has the magic bullet on that. But again, I think innovation and being nimble is really important to try new things. What we've been doing has worked in the past, but the demographic has shifted, the economic situation has shifted, so you just have to shift along with it, and sometimes there's a lag time.
The final question in our little visit on the porch here has to do with probably the one that is closest to people. It's property taxes and utilities. Mm-hmm. I think you've set the property rate for next year 5.6, something like that, as an increase, something in that 5% range.
Yeah.
But people are saying, I can't afford that.
Yeah.
So how can the city mitigate that?
So one of the things that we've asked for that it's a bit strange, I think, that we didn't have kind of coming in as a council is a service delivery, like what services we're delivering and what level of service we're delivering in each. So that could be something as simple as we sweep the streets after the snow melts every time during the winter. Or you could go lower than that. Well, they're going to get sand on them again anyway, so we're going to wait till spring, and then we're going to sweep the streets once. That's just a small example, but we need to take a look at our service levels and ask the question, what of these things do we want to give up? Certainly you can focus on labor, because that's usually the biggest cost in a service delivery business or organization. But ultimately, it does come down to what we as a community want. And I think part of it too is asking ourselves, are we the best person to deliver this service? Or is there a community group that we could just empower to provide that service? Transit's one, I think that was you'll probably remember better than me, like 2016, 2017.
It's been an ongoing issue.
Yeah, where, they did a survey, what would you get rid of? And transit was the one. But of course, that's reflective of not very many people use transit. But on the other hand, the people that use transit need transit. And transportation is an essential part of our city to be able to get to point A to point B for work, for leisure,
shopping.
Yeah. So I think we have to be conscious of that as well. There's a balance between, what the majority wants, but then also looking at, well, what's the consequences of actually getting rid of that? Because it could be a really big impact for a very small number of people.
It's not an easy job, and there are no easy answers.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Linnsie Clark, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.